It's 9 o'clock. This is Sky News. Welcome to our show, where I interview people who have something to say about the world today and how it's changing. They'll be from politics, sport, business, entertainment, public life, or they'll be everyday people caught up in the events of our times. I'll be putting my questions to tonight's special guests. Good evening. In a moment that shocked the world, it was revealed this week that the United States Supreme Court could vote to overturn abortion rights in the US. The revelation happened in an unprecedented leak from the court itself. The implications could see many states effectively banning abortion. I'll be talking to the veteran American civil liberties lawyer and fighter for women's rights, Gloria Allred. In case after case, she's advanced the feminist cause. Is her lifetime's work now in shreds? Also tonight, can any good come from a crime of unimaginable brutality? Claire Throssell's 2 children were murdered in a fire started by their father. Now she fights on their behalf for victims of domestic abuse. She's helped change the law already, but she says more, much more, needs to be done. And regardless of your views, if you're British, the royal family take up space in your media, your culture, even your mind. The journalist Tina Brown has spent years trying to peer behind palace doors. She says that for 30 years there's been a non-stop power play with the Queen herself holding the reins. As we look ahead to the Platinum Jubilee, I'll ask about tensions in the family and what might happen when the Queen's reign draws to its close. Jack and Paul were typical young boys until 8 years ago, when Jack was 12 and Paul was 9. Their father killed himself and them in a house fire. Their mother, Claire Throssell, vowed to protect other children caught up in domestic violence. She has successfully helped to pass the Domestic Abuse Act, but her work is not done, as she tells me in an interview we did earlier this week. And a warning, this interview has a description of how Jack and Paul were killed, which people may find distressing. Claire, first up, thanks for coming to talk to us today and telling us your story. I want to ask you about the events that led you here, your campaign to try and better protect children from domestic abusers. But let's start with your boys, Jack and Paul. What were they like?
They were the typical boys, very outgoing, confident. It's funny, you bring them up both exactly the same and yet they're so different. Jack was a lot more caring, a lot quieter. Paul was cheeky, full of fun, full of energy. Jack was a musician. He loved music. It ran through his veins like water down a stream, and he played the trumpet. And until he started playing the trumpet, he was quite an introvert, quite quiet boy.
Yeah.
But playing the trumpet absolutely changed his life.
Yeah.
He found that it was okay to try to do something and it's okay to fail. Paul was always trying to be like his brother. Paul was a runner, he was a sprinter. In fact, I think he could run before he could walk. And when you saw him run, it set him free. 150 was his favourite distance. And he loved the glamour of the track, but he used to light up from inside and he'd say, whatever's happening at home on that track, nothing can catch me, nothing can touch me.
And Claire, your boys would have been, Jack would have been 20 now, and Paul would have been 17. And do you sort of imagine it that Jack might have been a musician and Paul might have been a sort of a sprinter?
Yeah, their futures were taken away from them, and it's really an open wound that I keep picking, but it's bleeding anyway. I see his friends, and I saw one of Jack's friends the other day and he's got a beard. It's a case of that's what Jack would look like now. All the marks, the proms,
The milestones.
Learning to drive, leaving school, going to university, that could have been them, and that should have been them.
Can I go back to, if it's all right with you, to your experience and the events leading up to your boys, losing your boys? You met the boy's father when you were 25, I think. Did you notice any red flags about him back then, or did he woo you and was a very loving partner?
Back when I met him, there were no mention of domestic abuse. The term love bombing, he sent a rose to my works every day for 3 weeks,
Right.
until I said I'd go out with him.
Okay.
There was something I didn't like about him, and I'd said that I wouldn't go out with him. But, you know, after 3 weeks, you kind of feel sort of a little bit special, maybe a little bit more interesting than normal.
Yeah.
Now I would say to any young person that that's actually love bombing, and you're being conditioned to be loved.
Well, it's coercive, it's a bit controlling. You left your ex-husband after 16 years. That must have felt like a relief, was it, for you?
Well, to be honest, that's when the danger escalated.
For
So
the
it
boys,
wasn't a relief
or for you as well?
for all of us.
Okay.
Because that's when he lost control.
Right.
When,
Of you.
yeah, and the boys. Because the boys didn't want to see him.
But as you said, the situation deteriorated because the boys had unsupervised visitation with their father, even though you fought that in the court. Can you just explain to viewers what happened?
So in the July, I was forced to go to court and begin residency order proceedings against him. And that's when the fear and oppression just carried on. He was allowed to intimidate me in the court. I had to sit in the same waiting area, and he was sat just across from me. And what people don't realise about family courts is they're not protected like a magistrate's in a Crown Court. And in those courtrooms, perpetrators are allowed to cross-question their victims. And even though he had a barrister there, he hurled insult after insult across that room. It was just a boardroom. I was just 4 seats away from him. And in the second court hearing, he actually went for me. So we had to move away from the doorway. And when we got into the courtroom, the judge said that even though he'd shown and displayed this aggressive behaviour, he still could have 5 hours unsupervised access to his children a week.
So the boys went back, was it to your house?
Yeah,
To the family home?
we'd only been divorced 2 weeks.
Yeah.
By the 22nd of October. And when I walked in, call it instinct, call it worry, I always worried about the boys. I said, the phones are on the table, they need the phones every time they go to see their dad. And she said he was late picking them up today. So I was actually debating about going down there and giving them the phones, and if I had have done, I'd have been able to go in and get them. That haunts me to this day. But instead, I had my tea, and it could only have been 15 minutes. And the doorbell rang. And for some reason, I didn't want to answer it. Call it an instinct, call it a warning. And when I opened the door, there was a local police officer, and he stepped back under the light. And I looked at his face, and the first thing I said was, what has he done? Now, I live in a small village. He knew Jack and Paul. I'd pass them at school. I'd say to him, morning. He'd say, morning. And the look on his face, I knew.
You knew?
And I said, what has he done? And he said, there's been an incident, and you need to come with me now. The boys have been taken to Sheffield Children's Hospital. So I got in the car, and we travelled at about 100 miles an hour to Sheffield Children's Hospital. And he pulled into the square where the resus rooms are, and he said, go. go, go. So I ran in, and the first thing I saw was a medic doing CPR on Paul.
And Paul, who was then 9, your 9-year-old.
And I just remember watching him being bounced off the bed with the force of the CPR's not nice to see or do. And I was dragged literally into a room because I was just ready to run across to him. And a doctor came to me, and I could see with his face, and he said to me, "Are you their mum?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm very sorry, but we're going to let him go now in your arms." And I said, "What do you mean, go?" And he said, "There's nothing more we can do." So I ran through with him, and I just scooped him up into my arms. And when people say the light goes out of people's eyes, you don't believe it till you see it. And these beautiful blue eyes just looked at me, and they turned grey, and they just looked as if they were looking through me. And I said to him, "Come on, Paul, you can't leave. Don't do this. Stay." But he'd gone, and the nurse closed his eyes, and I was holding on to him so tightly, and my tears were wetting his hair, and I just sat rocking him. And I weren't screaming because I couldn't talk. The pain was just so intense.
Yeah, I mean,
there was nothing.
Yeah.
Just this pain and this love. And I said to him that I loved him, and that I promised him that no other child would be hurt by a parent or an adult. And I was still holding him tightly, and the medics came and said, "You have to let him go now, he's a crime scene." And they were just the wrong words to say, because he wasn't a crime scene, he was my son, my cheeky, full of energy, running son that I'd just dropped off at school 9 hours earlier, and he looked perfect. He just had a scratch down his nose, and that was from where Jack had pulled him across the attic. And he just looked like he was sleeping. And I said to the nurse, "Don't leave him on his own, he's only 9. And the nurse said, "No, I'll sit with him." And then I went over to Jack, and he was still fighting at this point. And they turned around and said to me, "You've got a choice now. We're taking Jack to Manchester. So you either stay and sit with Paul, or you go with Jack to Manchester." It was the furthest they'd ever been apart as brothers. They'd never spent a night apart. They'd never spent more than a few hours apart. We got to Manchester, and Jack held on for 5 days. He was 56% burnt, and details were coming out slow but sure about what had actually happened, so that they could piece it together. And they worked out that he'd actually barricaded the property and trapped Jack and Paul in the attic. He was found in one corner of the attic, and Jack had tried to escape, and when Paul fell, he went back for his brother, and he gave his hand in the darkness to his brother, and he used his own strength to pull his brother to the hatchway. And for 5 days, the hospital said I had to talk about Paul as if he was alive, because Jack believed he'd saved his brother. And Jack was only sedated. He wasn't in a coma. He was sedated for the pain.
He must have been in a lot of pain.
And if he knew that Paul hadn't made it, it would affect his recovery.
Yes.
So for 5 days, I sat at his bedside, and you could tell that he could hear, because every time I spoke to him, his heart monitor went right down.
So you just calmed him down, like hearing his mum just calmed him.
And then on the Monday, which was his third operation.
Yeah.
It weren't going well, and he'd come out and he was in recovery, but he wasn't recovering. And this nurse came flying down the corridor, and I just ran after her. She didn't even have to say anything. And they started CPR, because with burns victims, the potassium levels in your blood build up, and the potassium stops your heart.
Right, okay.
And Jack's potassium levels was too high, so he just went systolic, so his heart stopped. And again, I watched them perform CPR on him. I knew the longer that they were doing CPR, and God, they tried, that less of Jack would have come back. And if he hadn't have been able to play his trumpet, if he hadn't have been that gentle boy who had a heart and courage of a lion, then who were I bringing him back for? They fought and fought, and again they turned to me with that look in the face, and they said, we're going to have to call it. And I scooped him up in my arms. I promised him. I said to him that no more children should have to be killed by a parent. No other child should have to say to a fireman and a doctor and a police officer that their dad had hurt them and they'd done it on purpose. And no more parents would have to end up like me, just existing, just living, not even living. Nobody should have to hold their children in their arms as they die. And their lives were taken because the court said they could. I did everything by the book, played by the rules. I told the court in my application back in July that he was capable of killing the boys. Kafkas, I told them not to see him on their own, because when he heard something he didn't like, then he got aggressive. I told social services the same. Kafkas ignored that, and on the Monday before the Wednesday, she had an interview with him in her office, and when she terminated the interview, he barricaded her in the office and refused to let her leave the room. That was never reported, that was never acted on. And had I known that on the Wednesday, then I would have quite happily gone to jail rather than let them go on that visit. And Jack and Paul made 19 children murdered at the hands of a known perpetrator of domestic abuse. And now we're up to 43 children. And it's not even been 10 years. And I promised both of them that they would be the last.
Tell me what your goal is in terms of the next piece of legislation that you feel is necessary to better protect children.
There's a piece of legislation called Practice 12J.
Right.
And it's practice direction for children that are suffering abuse. Now, I can hear people screaming it now. If we have to have legislation to protect children who are going through abuse, why not just stop the presumption of contact in the first place? This small piece of legislation underneath the Children's Act was brought in around parental access to children. And in this legislation, it says it's in the child's best interest to see both parents. Now, this obviously needs changing to only if it's in the child's best interest and it's safe to do so. Because Practice 12J is what social services, Kafkas and judges make their rulings on. Now, there's so much made about parental rights, but there's this deafening silence when it comes to children's rights. And every child's right is to be safe and loved and protected.
One final question for you, Claire. The way you talk about them, it feels to me like they're still with you. They're very much still with you. You feel that, do you? That they are perched upon your shoulders?
The day that I don't talk about them, the day that I don't feel them, that's the day that they die. And I will keep talking about them. And I will challenge every court in this land. I'll challenge every lord, every lady, every baroness, every baronet, every prime minister. I will challenge them all to say that they have done the best that they can to keep every child in this country safe. And not one of them can look at me in the face and say that. And I will carry on asking the awkward questions. I will ask people to sign the petition. I will ask them to sign the campaign, and I will take it back through courts again, and I will take it to the House of Lords again. Because since they ruled that Practice Direction 12J didn't need looking at, more children have died. More. And they could have made a difference to those children. And they have to be held accountable for that. And so far, nobody is. So I'm going to carry on, even though it rips my heart in two every day, because they would have stood up and done the same for me. And that's why I carry on in their names.
Well, Claire, thank you. It felt like a real privilege that you shared your story with me and told me about your boys and told us about your campaign. So thank you so much. I'm really grateful. I know that that's not easy. Thanks for telling it.
Thank you.
Claire Throssell there, very brave and still campaigning hard. Now stay with us, because coming up next, Tina Brown, author of The Palace Papers, speaks to me about the royal family, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, and the future of the British monarchy. Welcome back. Tina Brown is the former editor-in-chief at Tatler magazine, Vanity Fair and The New Yorker. 15 years ago, Tina released the Diana Chronicles, dubbed a profound and in-depth look at Princess Diana's life and death. Now her new book, The Palace Papers, Inside the House of Windsor, tackles the highs and lows of the royal family, including the controversy surrounding the Duke of York and Harry and Meghan's infamous move to the US. Tina, thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for sending us a copy of this. And I have been kept up very late at night reading it, because it's genuinely a really good read. And it's a page-turning drama, really, of the ups and downs of the past 2 decades of royal life. And it struck me when I was reading the book that after Diana, the Queen effectively said, never again will one member of the royal family destabilise the whole institution like the way Diana and that whole situation did. And then I thought of Prince Harry and Andrew, and it seems to me that they've been having quite a good go at destabilising the institution and the Queen.
Well, that's right, in a different way. I mean, Diana's destabilisation was because she became bigger almost than the institution, which was something that they'd never encountered before. In the case of, Andrew and Harry, of course, Andrew was an explosion waiting to happen. Frankly, the way he'd been carrying on decade after decade, really kind of unpoliced in a sense about what he was getting up to. So that exploded, as it inevitably would, frankly. Harry was, I think, the real kind of unsettling surprise. In a way, Harry has sort of continued his mother's legacy, essentially, of throwing hand grenades. And I think that's what they've found so destabilising about Harry, is they don't quite know when another one of the guns is going to go off, which is what we've been seeing, really, ever since, for the last 4 or 5 years.
And I was going to come on to Harry and Meghan in a bit, but more broadly, when you think about the monarchy, which you've studied for many, many years, and Britain, it seems that the monarchy is able to adapt and it has this ability to survive. Is it rather like the Terminator? It's a sort of something that's indestructible, do you think?
It is, or is proven to be, in the sense it's lasted for 1,000 years. But we are at a perilous moment, I think, in this particular time, because a lot of the dramas of the last 25 years I wrote about was somehow the Queen at the centre was always this still centre of composure.
In the storm.
In the storm. She was always going to sort of pull it together and pull it out. The difference now, of course, is we have a very frail Queen in the last twilight years of her life. And there won't be her as the composure at the centre to pull the institution around and keep on representing it with the same kind of gravitas. So that's much more concerning, I think, now, that the rocking in the boat somehow can be quelled for a while King Charles, which he will be, you know, takes over and tries to right the ship.
So that will be a big danger point, you think, in the monarchy's survival?
I think it's a very, very unsettled point. And Charles is going to have quite a challenge, I think, in sort of calming all the troubled waters. And I think, personally, that the British people will actually rally to Charles because, you know, there's a desire, I think, for this institution to continue. There hasn't been really any great, potent lobby in England to get rid of the monarchy, but it has been tarnished a great deal by these last few years. And Charles is going to have to figure out how to sort of start to really modernise the monarchy more than it has been, and also to find a way to kind of keep those troubles that have been assailing them at bay.
I want to go through the women now with you, briefly. Camilla, I mean, in the book, what you describe really is this turnaround for her, that over the decades, she's gone from this sort of villainous comedy character to someone who's accepted, if not quite loved, by the public. What genius was behind this rehabilitation of her, or rather, was it just, in your view, the passage of time?
Well, there was a lot of genuine professional efforts behind Camilla's rehabilitation. Mark Bolland, you know, who was the communications secretary for Charles right after the end of the end of the Diana era, just as that was ending, he came in, and he spent many a year carefully strategizing the sort of emergence of Camilla. But it was always a question, I think, not only of strategy and how she emerged, but once people came to understand who Camilla really was, as opposed to how she'd been demonised, that ultimately that final acceptance is Camilla's triumph, because people who get to know Camilla, who really see Camilla up close, love Camilla. So that was really, I suppose, what Charles knew. He knew if only people knew her like I know her, they wouldn't have the hostility to her. So, you know, it's been wonderful to see that, I think.
And you portray her in a very positive light in the book, as you do with Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge. Kate Middleton's very much the hero of your book, and you've spoken about the immense good luck William had in finding Kate, and as you just said, has become the rock of the family. In the book, you write of her serene empathy, as you put it, in sort of saving William. Does she have any edges at all? Is there any flawlessness in this character, or is she perfection?
No one is perfection, and I think that what I hear is that the Kate in private is a much more relaxed, loose, warm, you know, joshing kind of fun woman. But she has decided that the best way for her to present to the public is, in a sense, by taking a leaf out of the Queen's book and presenting a certain kind of inscrutability.
Yes.
And she's very savvy in understanding at a much more difficult time than the Queen, frankly, experienced, because when the Queen was in her early years, the press was completely deferential. I mean, there was no expose of going on behind the scenes. So but in this age, she's dealing with a much more invasive press, but she's found a way to kind of control her image, if you like, in a very smart way, as any kind of major movie star does. So she's very savvy, Kate, and not, I don't think, quite acknowledged for being quite the sophisticated strategist that she is.
What strikes me in the book, though, too, is, let's come on to Meghan. There's a sense of disdain for Meghan I pick up in this book, and it left me with the impression that you think she's rather spoilt. Is that fair, Tina?
Well, I actually don't think that there is disdain for Meghan in the book. I feel that I actually understand why she reacted as she did. How extraordinarily difficult it was for an outsider, an American, to come into this sort of tight, arcane family with all of its traditions and its history, and it was an absolutely, for her, sort of impenetrable experience. I think that she just didn't realise, as I think a lot of Americans certainly don't realise, that actually the royal way of life is nothing like the celebrity way of life. It's nothing like the life.
You're a royal or you're a celebrity.
Yeah, it's nothing like the California elite's way of life. It's nothing. I mean, it's actually, they live, you know, in a very unflashy way. Their vacations are in the rain often, tramping around, you know, having picnic outdoors. This is not anything, in a sense, that is as glamorous, I think, or as exciting or as desirable as most people on the outside looking at the glitter and glamour of being a princess. They're not seeing that. They're not seeing, quite frankly, the kind of frugal, threadbare aspect of the existence.
Tina, when you think of that couple now and speaking to lots of people, you spoke to dozens of people for this book, do you think that they can come back to the royal family? Do you think there's a way back for them? I mean, some of the things that you account, you know, it feels like maybe it's irreversible, these rifts.
It does at the moment, but I tend to feel there will be a desire to have the Sussexes back. If something can be worked out where the Sussexes are happy and a role can be found that they can do. I think that really because after the death of the Queen, there is going to be such a huge seismic public reaction. There's going to be, you know, a sense of tearing of the fabric of this country with the passing of the Queen, who for 70 years has been the only thing we know. She's on the money, even. That I think that there will be a desire to have the Sussexes back just because they bring a connection to the younger part of this nation. You know, Harry was the most popular member of the royal family, and to have a beautiful, you know, dynamic woman of colour at his side was actually a fantastic thing for Britain. It really was. And there was a sense of great loss, actually, there in the palace, that it didn't work out. The question is whether Meghan will ever want to come back to this
I was going to say, you can see Harry may be coming back, but Meghan won't.
It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine Meghan will want to come back after everything that's passed. But, you know, time passes, and it's quite possible that this entertainment deals that they've done are going to not be as glittering as they expect.
Could you see a situation where Harry comes back and Meghan does not? I guess
I think,
it's an impossible
I think that
answer,
this marriage. I mean, I think, you know, that Harry is devoted to her and to the children. So I don't know how it could happen. But you know, the fact is that if you're a member of the royal family, you can be as boring as you like forever, and you're still going to be at the top of the bill. If you're in an entertainment world, you have to earn, you know, your place in it by having a hit, and that's very hard to accomplish.
But the next hit's going to be the memoirs, Prince Harry's memoirs, in September.
Harry has...
How damaging could that... Because you say there's a way back, and I think the comments about Kate making Meghan cry, I mean, those things Kate can't reply to, but must cut her quite deeply. The memoirs come out, what more revelations could happen?
I think that, you know, your original question, can they come back? I think that one of the questions is what is said in this memoir. And that's the part that everyone in the family finds very hard to understand why Harry's done that. Because to have that hanging over them as a kind of thing hanging out there of, like, what is he going to say, you know, just at a point when the Queen is at her most fragile, I think there's a huge anxiety about it.
That was the other question I had about the other person that does or doesn't come back, Prince Andrew. Obviously, he escorted the Queen at Prince Philip's memorial service, but is there any way back for him, or once the Queen isn't there anymore, his relationship with Charles is very fractious? Is that it for him?
I don't think there's a way back for Andrew. I really don't. I think that Andrew thinks there's a way back for Andrew. But I do not think there is a way back for Andrew. And I think that Charles will have to spell that out even more clearly than it has been spelled out thus far. To see him escorting his mother at Prince Philip's memorial was something that nobody liked the sight of. It felt so unfortunate. This person, so recently disgraced, had sort of managed to get himself into a position where he was right away, before the cameras, escorting the most revered woman in the world.
But it speaks to the love the Queen has for her son.
The Queen, at this point in her life, I mean, it is her son and she loves her family. And she's always found a way to sort of differentiate between herself as sovereign and herself as a mother and a grandmother. And sometimes that for her has proved very, very painful because she said that things become in conflict. I mean, she was ultimately had to deny her sister Margaret, you know, the love of her life, Peter Townend. But when it comes down to protecting the crown, she's always done that.
One final question for you. We are, as you said, drawing towards the end of the Queen's reign. She has lived longer than millions and millions of our subjects. Most of us can't imagine a world where she isn't there. She almost symbolises Britain and what Britishness is. How traumatic do you think it will be for the country when Queen Elizabeth is no longer there?
I think it will be an absolutely pivotal moment in this country. I think that the mourning will be intense and not only for this remarkable woman and what she's been able to do in her life, for every day of her life, but also for a way of Britishness, perhaps, that she's always epitomised. She has come to stand, I think, for all the values that this nation holds dear, you know, stoicism, a sense of duty, a sense of fairness, a sense of doing the right thing. And to lose that, I think, is going to be a traumatic event.
Well, I think we're all dreading that moment, actually. Tina, thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth.
And as I said, I have thoroughly enjoyed this book, which I haven't quite finished because it's big, but it's good. Thanks so much.
Keep reading.
I'm going to get through it. Thanks for coming in to see me.
Thank you so much.
Tina Brown there. Well, stay with us because coming up next, I've got Gloria Allred, the US Attorney that has dedicated her life to women's rights. US Attorney Gloria Allred has built her career representing women and protecting women's rights, working with accusers of R. Kelly, Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby. This week, a leak from the US Supreme Court suggested that it could overturn the case that legalised abortion, sparking outrage in the US. Earlier, I spoke to Gloria about that case, and she told her own story about her abortion. Gloria, thank you so much for talking today. Let's focus on that bombshell leak from the Supreme Court. Were you shocked?
Well, I was shocked by the unprecedented leak of a draft opinion from the U.S. Supreme Court. We've never seen anything like this before. But more importantly, the shock was that there is a majority on the U.S. Supreme Court who is not just going to chip away at Roe v. Wade, the 1973 United States Supreme Court decision that found that women have a constitutional right to legal and safe abortions, at least at certain stages of their pregnancy. But instead, the majority is going to strike it down completely. And this, of course, is catastrophic, and it's dangerous to the lives and the health of women.
And Gloria, I wonder, actually, when I saw the leak, I wondered whether it had been leaked because someone wanted it out there in order to try and stoke up enough resistance that the leaked document might get changed. To explain it to our viewers, is this the end of the constitutional protection for abortion, perhaps forever? Or do you think that the leaked document, given the reaction in the US, might get changed?
I think it's highly unlikely that the decision of the majority will change. It's possible. Is it probable? Not likely. So we have to prepare for the day when we lose the constitutional right to choose abortion, and remembering the victims who are going to be most at risk. And those are young women. Those are poor women. Those are women of color. Those are women who are rural women. And those women are most vulnerable, those four categories, because often they don't have the money to travel to another state in the United States, like California, where I am now, New York, some other states, haven states, where abortion will remain legal because we are pro-choice states. And so they don't have money to put gasoline in their car, if they even have a car, or to buy a train ticket or a bus ticket. They don't have money for childcare to take care of their other children while they travel to get an abortion. So this is mandatory motherhood. This is deciding that a fertilized egg has more rights than an adult woman. And that is dangerous. It is wrong. Even teenagers who get pregnant, Beth, and have their parents consent to get an abortion. In some of these states, they won't be able to get it. In some of these states, they're even outlawing medication abortions, meaning taking a pill in your own home to self-induce an abortion, which is important because half of all abortions in the United States are medication abortions. And they're often, to get the pill in the mail, they have to have a consultation with a doctor online, telemedicine, and many states are outlawing that.
That's what's at stake. Can Congress simply, where do you go from here? Can Congress simply legislate to replicate that constitutional protection for women? Is that an option?
Yes, Beth, and that's what the president meant when he said it could be codified. The Women's Health Protection Act has already been passed by the House of Representatives, but we all know it's unlikely to even be voted on by the United States Senate because they will filibuster, keep talking, and not allow a vote because many of the anti-choice politicians are cowards and they don't want people to know that they'll vote against the Women's Health Protection Act. And so we have to fight. You know, who knows? Maybe we're going to have to add justices to the US Supreme Court. You know, we're going to have to also fight state by state.
I wanted to talk to you about your story, actually, because this is personal for you, isn't it? You were one of those women, and now you're very, very frightened about this happening to other women. Can you briefly tell us your story?
I'm more than frightened. I'm angry. I'm fired up, and I'm ready to go to fight, to battle. And I will be speaking at the LA City Hall rally on May 14th. And there are going to be rallies all over this country, pro-choice rallies in every state on that date. Yes, it is personal for me because I had to pay someone who was not licensed to perform abortions after I was raped at gunpoint in Mexico when I was on vacation there and returned to California when I was in my 20s and before Roe v. Wade made abortion safe and legal. And then I had to have an ambulance called, be taken to the hospital with 106-degree fever, packed in ice. And that's where a nurse said to me, "I hope this teaches you a lesson," meaning she was anti-choice. It did teach me a lesson, but the lesson was that abortion must be safe and legal and affordable and available. And that is why I have been fighting for pro-choice laws and to preserve Roe v. Wade for all of my professional life, 47 years in law practice, and even before that. And we must protect, because women will die and will be maimed by illegal abortion or be compelled to take pregnancies to term when they're not ready and able to support a child that may be born. So this is a dangerous time, and we must fight back.
And just to pick up something you said, you said that one option would be to add justices to the Supreme Court. Is that something that President Biden could try to do? How would that work?
Well, you know, that's an option. It's a very difficult one. It's a very controversial one. But, you know, these are extreme times, and we know that. And so, you know, I mean, how extreme does it get? How extreme more does it get? When in some states, they're even requiring rape victims, children who are victims of incest, to give birth and not be able to get an abortion. So, we're going to explore all options. All options are going to be on the table. Yes, this is radical, as the president has said, and it is radicalizing women and girls in this nation in the way it never has before. So get ready. We're going to be exploring all options. It's not going to be just an academic task. We are going to take to the streets. We are going to take to the courts. We are going to go in the court of public opinion, and we are going to do everything that is legal and not necessarily peaceful to win our rights. And we are going to get out the vote in every election now, and we are going to vote because our lives depend on it. And that is why we will.
And Gloria, just Roe versus Wade, it seemed permanent. I remember studying it at school. It was past 49 years ago when you were just a young woman. Did you ever, because I don't think I did you ever imagine it might be overturned? And do you see this as a colossal failure of the American left, of the women's movement? You must feel quite angry at your country at the moment, do you?
Well, all I can say is the anti-choice forces have not stopped since Roe v. Wade in challenging it. They have filed many lawsuits, some of which have gone to the Supreme Court and in every state. So they have been fighting, they have been chipping away, and now it's the ultimate time for them. They are people celebrating that they get to control women and their choices and their lives. But we are going to show them that we have, the determination and the persistence. We will resist, we will persist, and we will insist that women's rights be respected. And I believe that we will win. It will be a battle, but we expect to and intend to win this war against women.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I really appreciated your time. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime.
Well, that's all for tonight's show. Thank you to all our guests, Claire Throssell, Tina Brown and Gloria Allred. And thank you for watching. And if you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can listen to the Beth Rigby's interview podcast. A new episode's available now. Each week, I take a look at the highlights of the interviews, and there's some extra bits in there too from me and my producer, Molly Malone. That's on the Sky News app or wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on Sky News at 10, as the polls close, I'll bring you the latest on the local elections and the Northern Ireland elections.